Welcome to Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. And joining me, as always, my co-host, Stephen Young of Roto Grinders, better known as Stevie TPFL. And this week, we're talking bets for the AdventHealth 400 at Kansas Speedway here on Running Hot. Before we talk about Dover, I want to let everybody know that we are having a special Running Hot episode this week to discuss the Denny Hamlin Bracket Challenge. If you hadn't heard about that, Denny Hamlin on his Actions Detrimental podcast, he proposed a 32 driver bracket over 5 weeks, head-to-head matchups where they play down March Madness style to a winner to crown the Denny Hamlin Bracket Challenge champion. So Stevie and I are going to talk about our brackets for that, and we're going to build a bracket together on that podcast. So make sure you tune in to that extra special episode. But last week, Martin Truex Jr. broke his 54 race winless streak, I should say, by holding off Ross Chastain on a late restart. Chastain finished second. Ryan Blaney rounded out the podium. And of course, there was controversy that did surround Ross Chastain once again. He ended up spinning Brennan Poole from behind, a lapped car, and Brennan Poole went up the track, crashed into Kyle Larson, taking out one of the best cars in the race, Kyle Larson. So, really good race, really good racing, controversy, pretty fun race at Dover. Stevie, what did you think?
I love that place, man. Like, don't change that place. At any racetrack, really, there's going to be laws where you just have longer runs and like people aren't moving. But I mean, Dover, I feel like, is a track where if you're faster than someone, you can pass. There's multiple grooves. There's strategy. We're getting a little bit more tire wear. I don't think it's going to be a thing for a long time. People were worried on the green track, but once we started to see cars on track, and even after the rain that we had on Saturday, tire wear wasn't really a thing. And it was good racing. It was good racing throughout. We had battles for the lead. One of the best cars won the race. Just Chastain take two, and then we have like Truex and Chastain battling it out without Chastain stuck behind the car on that last restart. I mean, that's where the strategy comes in. But I think Truex had one of the best cars. He won the race. I think the biggest shocker to me really was probably Ryan Blaney. Top 5 car all day. Like, just ran top 5. Yeah. That's not a good track for him. I mean, it just kind of goes back to he's fast. When is he going to put it all together and win a race? But overall, I think Dover was a fantastic race, and I'm pumped for Kansas this weekend. Like, it's been over a month since we've had an intermediate track, and before, 2020, 2021, we're like, oh, intermediate tracks. But like now with this car, it's like, hey, bring on an intermediate track.
Yeah, no, definitely NASCAR with the next gen car, the current rules that they have, it's made intermediate track racing very interesting. And, you make a good point there about Ryan Blaney running top 5 all day at a track he had never finished better than 8th at prior to that. Ryan Blaney now the next guy with the long winless streak to break after Martin Truex Jr. snapped that 54 race winless streak. It's interesting because Truex and Blaney were the two that were fighting it out for that last playoff spot last year. Truex got the monkey off his back, so to speak. Now we'll see if Ryan Blaney can do that. But we do head to Kansas Speedway for some classic 1.5 mile racing. Kansas Speedway, most similar track, comparable track would be Las Vegas. And, you mentioned it's been a month since we've had some classic intermediate track racing. So let's talk about that racing at Kansas, at Las Vegas, at these types of tracks. What do we see here?
I mean, really, like you mentioned Vegas, you can kind of throw Auto Club in there too. The tire wear is not the same, but it is like kind of a large oval as well. Like Kansas, I don't think Kansas has like a direct comp. I mean, I would say probably close to Vegas, like you mentioned. But I mean, it's really like Michigan too. So, I mean, that's another track that you could potentially comp into. But I mean, the racing's fast. Things happen really fast here. I mean, even last year, if we look at last year's stats, like no one like truly dominated a race. Kurt was really good. Kansas won. But we saw very like spread out, like fast laps came, for a bunch of different cars. So I kind of expect the same this week, where we'll see some stuff happened where pit strategy might get mixed up a little bit, but I think we're going to see a bunch of guys lead laps. I think we're going to see a bunch of guys, kind of in and out of the top 10. And I mean, usually Kansas is one of my favorite 1.5s just because there's usually always action going on at the track. And I mean, it's just a fun track. And I'm glad that like NASCAR runs this track twice a year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Kansas a really, really fun track. And, we mentioned comping it to Las Vegas. I will say, Las Vegas, it is 20 degrees banking in the turns, whereas Kansas is 17 to 20 degrees with that progressive banking there. So it makes it a little bit different, just a little bit different, because we do have that progressive banking there at Kansas. And, you comped it as well to Michigan. I think that's a very fair comp. Of course, also, there's Auto Club, like you mentioned. Last year at Texas, we ran this same tire combination that we're running here. We ran it in all three of the playoff, 1.5 mile tracks: Kansas, Las Vegas, Texas. We ran it at Auto Club this year, ran at Las Vegas this year, this same tire combination. So as far as tires go, we definitely have a bunch of races that we could comp for Kansas, and they're all intermediate tracks as well. But I do, at least in my data, when I look at Kansas and say, what are the most similar tracks to Kansas? And I look at correlations, Las Vegas, very clearly the number one track. In fact, Kansas and Las Vegas in the whole series are the two tracks that are most correlated based off the data I've looked at since 2016. And that's over a bunch of different metrics, whether it's driver rating, average running position, green flag speed, etc. So definitely think Las Vegas is going to be the number one comp for Kansas, but you can pull in those other tracks as well, especially when we're looking at this tire combination. So knowing all of that, how are we evaluating drivers at Kansas? Because you mentioned it is going to be kind of spread out in terms of the fastest laps. So how are we, when we're looking at betting, how are we evaluating drivers?
Speed. There's a lot of weeks we're talking about like passing, and we're talking about like who's running where. Dude, Kansas is a track that I want speed. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at Kansas last year as far as who was fast in those races. I'm going to go back to look at who's fast in Vegas. Chevy has been very, very fast on intermediate tracks this year. They've unloaded with a ton of speed. So, I mean, I want speed. Like, obviously, we can look into driver rating and all that stuff, but I mean, to simply answer your question, speed. I mean, I think that's going to be the best correlation to trying to win bets this weekend, is just who's fast. So, we saw really, like, it was William Byron, Kyle Larson, Alex Bowman were the class of the field at Las Vegas. Not only did they have the best speed, but look where they finished. They finished first, second, and third. And like, when you have a lot of speed at Kansas, like, no one saw Kurt Busch coming last year. And he did it with speed. Bubba Wallace in the fall, he did it with speed. Bubba Wallace in the spring had a ton of speed in his pit road. We won't even get there.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just, when I'm looking at Kansas, it really, to me, I want fast cars.
Yeah, I agree with that. And when you mentioned speed, my metric, of course, it's called flags. It stands for field level adjusted green speed. And that's basically looking at a lap by lap, who was fast. So that it goes over the course of the whole race. But we're looking at each individual lap, and we're comparing all the healthy cars. So if a car was damaged, I'm not counting it in that metric. So that's a great way. And it doesn't penalize a car if it was damaged. That way we're just looking at the laps where they did run healthy. And so, if they ran, of the 267 laps, so they only ran 67 of them healthy, then we're just looking at that 67 lap sample for that one guy. And then we're weighing it based off the car count, we're weighing it based off track position. So when I look at my flags metric, you mentioned speed. Well, at Las Vegas, the top 11 cars were Chevys and Toyotas.
Yep.
Top of the board, Kyle Larson, number 1, William Byron, number 2, Alex Bowman, number 3, all Hendrick Motorsports cars. Then we go number 4, Martin Truex Jr., number 5, Bubba Wallace, number 6, Denny Hamlin, all Toyotas. 7th was Ross Chastain, 8th, Christopher Bell, 9th, Tyler Reddick, 10th, Daniel Suarez. So another mixture of Toyotas and Chevys from a couple different teams there. You got Trackhouse in there, and you got the Toyotas from 2311 and JGR. So when we're talking speed, at least at Las Vegas, those were the fast teams. We'll have to see if the Fords can catch up this week. So with that preview out of the way, it is time to dive into some bets. As always, we're going to take you for a lap around Kansas. That's 4 turns, 1 pick from each of us per turn before we drive into victory lane. So, Stevie, we've taken the green flag, and it's time to dive into turn 1. All right, Stevie, start us off with your turn 1 pick.
We just got to talking all about Chevy and Toyota, and I'm very high on Toyota, and we're going to talk plenty of Toyota here. But I'm going to start off with a Ford.
Oh, baby.
Austin Cindric, top 10, plus 300 at BetMGM. I mean, this is a guy that was top 12 in speed in both Kansas races last year. He finished 11th and 12th in those races, hoping they can continue to qualify. Like, Austin Cindric has qualifying figured out. Like, almost every week we see him in the top 10. He's very good at qualifying. And I mean, having track position at Kansas is important. So getting that track position off of qualifying and, potentially trying to keep it all day would be huge for him. My model likes this one. It's showing value here at 3-1. So I like it. I really like the Ford or the Chevys and the Toyotas, but I think there's value to looking at Austin Cindric top 10. Like, we're getting a Penske car for a top 10 at plus 300. So there's a couple top 10s standing out to me this week. We'll get into another one here in a little bit, but this is one that I'm finding really nice value at plus 300.
Yeah, so Austin Cindric did end up finishing 6th at Las Vegas. I would say a little fortunate, but I mean, that's what we're looking for when we're taking a plus 300 bet. We're looking to get a little fortunate. He doesn't have to be top 10 in speed. He just has to be near the top 10 in speed within a striking distance, maybe top 15 in speed or something like that, and hope for a couple other cars to have some issues, maybe a late race caution to shake things up. That's exactly what you're looking for when you're taking a driver at 3-1 for a top 10 finish. For me, my turn 1 pick, I'm going to go with the top 10 bet as well, but I'm taking Daniel Suarez at plus 150. PJ Walsh wrote this bet up at Action Network, and I totally agree with him here. Daniel Suarez, as I mentioned, was 10th in flags at Las Vegas. And then last year, he finished 10th at the second Kansas race. In the first Kansas race, he was running inside the top 10 when he had his problem there. At Auto Club earlier this year, he finished 4th and, was even faster. I think he was 4th in flags at Auto Club. I'm clicking over here and pulling that up. Yeah, he was 5th in flags at Auto Club. So while, again, not quite the same track, it's the same, tire combination at least, Auto Club really high tire wear, but still the same tire. So, and another intermediate track. So it helps build our sample size a little bit at least. So I've got Daniel Suarez at nearly a coin flip to finish inside the top 10, right? If you're hanging out around 10th in speed, 11th in speed, 12th in speed, as you mentioned, you're pretty much a coin flip to finish inside the top 10, but we're getting plus 150 here. So that's what I have on Daniel Suarez.
Trackhouse in general, like Ross Chastain, since the new car has been going, has the best average finish and best driver rating. So I think Trackhouse in general is just underrated still. Like, they've proven themselves, but they're still like that underrated team. So I mean, getting this at plus money is just nice. I mean, I would bet this until you get it under plus money. Like, you have to start giving juice. So I think this is a great find by you and PJ. I'm going to tail it. I like this one a lot.
All right. Well, that is our turn 1 pick. So it's time to roll into turn 2. All right. We're in turn 2, Stevie. What do you have for us?
All right. I listen, we got to go to the Toyota camp. I think that we've had a month off now between intermediate tracks. Toyota is going to catch up to Chevy some. So give me Bubba Wallace top 5 plus 275 over on BetMGM. This is one that I really debated on just writing up like an outright because of how good he was last year at this track and how good 2311 was good at this track. But then I have to pull myself back a little bit because Tyler Reddick is very talented and he's in the 2311 camp as well. So I got to give him a little respect there, as good as Kurt was last year. So I just went with a top 5 here. I really like the plus 275. I think he has the upside to potentially win this race. You can look at him as a top Toyota if you want to. There's a lot of ways to get Bubba Wallace without having to pay the full value on the winning the race. So he finished 10th and 1st last year in these 2 races. It was one of the best tracks for Toyota as a group last year. And I mean, when we look at it too, Wallace finished 4th at the only 1.5 intermediate track this season, which is Las Vegas. So if we're going to continue to comp Las Vegas, to this racetrack, we have to have interest in Bubba Wallace. And I like the plus 275 on the top five, not getting the full odds on him to win the race, where I do think he has the upside. There's a lot of good cars, and I think a top five is a little bit safer. And it's going to give me a higher ROI than trying to bet him to win the race.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I had Bubba as my turn 4 pick, but I'm actually going to make him now my turn 2 pick. We'll flip my turn 2 and turn 4 pick because I think it's just good to tail off of that. I'm going to take Bubba Wallace top Toyota at 6-1. I've got plus 525 as fair value on this bet. Obviously, he won Kansas in the playoff race last year. You mentioned Kansas won. He had that rocket ship, but his pit crew kept screwing him over. Let's just put it that way. He had to come through the field multiple times just to finish inside the top 10, and he just kept driving through the field. I think he passed the most cars in that race. At Las Vegas 2 last year, he was running inside the top 5. He was running as the top Toyota when he and Kyle Larson had their famous incident now. And this year earlier at Las Vegas, in the first race of Las Vegas this year, we talked about flags. He was the second Toyota in flags. So when you're constantly top 1, top 2 in terms of the Toyota camp, 6-1 for top Toyota, just far too long there. So we're both on Bubba Wallace for turn 2. So we got to go down the backstretch and time to dive bomb it in there into turn 3. All right, Stevie, we're in turn 3. Give us your pick.
Let's go to the fill-in driver, right? The potential star of NASCAR. Man, this week has been crazy for Josh Berry. I really like the top 10 at plus 200 on BetMGM, but I think people like saying that he's going to be like the next star. Like, let's calm it down. He's run good. He's in a Hendrick Motorsports car. That car was set up for Alex Bowman. Alex Bowman's best track, one of his best tracks. Like, I mean, to think about in that mindset, though, like this is one of Alex Bowman's best tracks too. Finished 9th and 4th at Kansas last year in the 2 races. He ranked top 8 in speed in both of those races. If Bowman was in this car, what, Nick, minus 150 for a top 10 at minimum? So getting Berry at plus 200 here is really nice value for me. Bowman had one of the best cars at Las Vegas earlier this year, and it's really just, honestly, for me, to get a Hendrick Motorsports car at plus 200 for a top 10 is just insane value. So I'm not going to pass on this one. I think like after practice and qualifying, we're going to see this line move. So this is one I want to jump on early this week.
Yeah, no, I mean, Alex Bowman, 3rd in flags this year at Las Vegas. You mentioned how Kansas, one of his best tracks. He won at Vegas last year. So we're definitely getting a fast car. The question is, what can Josh Berry do with this car? Well, Josh Berry, pretty good at Kansas himself, if you look in the Xfinity series. So I definitely like this bet here for Josh Berry to finish inside the top 10. For me, in my turn 3 pick, I am going to go with a head-to-head match. And I'm going to go back to Daniel Suarez here. I'm going to take Daniel Suarez minus 110 over Ty Gibbs. And, you know, Ty Gibbs, got to give him credit. He's been improving. He's had a bunch of top 10 finishes recently. He was running inside the top 10 for most of the Dover race, or for a large chunk of the Dover race. He didn't end up finishing inside the top 10, but he's definitely shown improvement. But I think he still has to improve more to be as good as Daniel Suarez at this specific track type. I mentioned Suarez was 10th in flags at Vegas. Well, Ty Gibbs was 22nd in flags here, or I should say at Vegas earlier this year. Last year at Kansas and Vegas struggled a little bit as well in both of those races. If we look at Auto Club, Daniel Suarez 5th in flags, Ty Gibbs 23rd, again on that same tire combination here. So while Gibbs has improved, maybe those numbers get better. Maybe he closes the gap to Suarez a little bit. It's still a pretty hefty gap that he has to make up to be as good as Daniel Suarez here. So I think Daniel Suarez should be a heavier favorite than minus 110 over Ty Gibbs.
You have to remember, too, the experience in a cup car and on these tracks. Like, Ty Gibbs is extremely talented, and he's on a really good stretch right now. But if he wasn't on that stretch, this would be like minus 140. So I think this is a great bet. I think Kansas is a track we're going to see, you know, Toyotas do well. But, I mean, you're just getting a guy that's already shown and proven that he's a top 10 car on this type of racetrack against a rookie. I mean, that's what Ty Gibbs is. He's a rookie. He's in fantastic equipment. He's extremely talented. But anytime you're getting almost even money on a rookie against a talented driver that's proven that he's a top 10 guy, like I like this one too.
Yeah, gotta back the proven goods there, I would say, on Daniel Suarez. So that is our turn 3 pick. One more turn to go before we dive into victory lane. So we're gonna dive into turn 4. All right, what do you got for us in turn 4, Stevie?
I mean, we're coming out of turn 4. We're seeing that checkered flag, so we got to go to a winner, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm going to go to a winner, and that's Toyota. Race winning manufacturer plus 135. I got you all. I know I got you all. Chevy was better than Toyota at both Kansas and Auto Club, or Vegas and Auto Club earlier this season. We're not going to argue that. With that said, though, Toyota wasn't that far behind, and we've had over a month since the last intermediate track. We know that Toyota is going to make some gains. Toyota won both races here last year after making gains on Chevy as well. So I think like we're looking at the metrics from those races. Top four of the top 5 drivers, best average finishes were Toyotas. And if we add in Kurt, it would have been 5 of the best 6 because he only raced one of the races, and he that average finish of 1 looks really good. So miss you, Kurt. I hope you're doing well. My model has Toyota as the favorite in this one, so I'm showing value with them being second behind Chevy. I think that if Toyota comes out and has speed in practice and qualifying, this moves to really like a coin flip type of bet. So I think getting this one early and just getting it locked in at plus 135 is the way that I'm going to approach it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we mentioned the whole top 10 was half Toyota, half Chevy at Las Vegas. So hard to go against that when you're saying, well, literally half of the top 10 cars were this manufacturer. You know, it puts them closer to even money in my mind to win, because we're not really, I mean, there is some chance, but we're not really saying that cars outside of the top 10 or 12 or so are typically going to win this race. So when you think about it that way, if they're making up half of the top 10, they should be not even money, but closer to even money than plus 135. So I definitely like this bet for your turn 4 pick. So for my turn 4 pick, I'm going back to what I would have taken in turn 2 because I wanted to tail off that Bubba Wallace play with my Bubba Wallace play. So for my turn 4 pick, I'm going not with a winner here, but we're getting close enough to win. I'm going to take top 3 bet on Ross Chastain at 4-1. That just 4-1 blows my mind here. That price, that is just, it's way out of line. I've seen it as low as like plus 300, 3-1, I should say, at some books. So Ross Chastain, 2nd and 7th in flags at Auto Club in at Vegas earlier this year, both on this tire combination. Arguably the best car at Dover, which is the only other race we've run with this package, right? Obviously Dover's not really an intermediate track, but we can call it maybe the intermediate package because we have that shorter, flatter track package. The same thing as the road courses. We've had a dirt race. We've had drafting races as our other races. So in the 3 races with this package, Ross Chastain has been a top 7 car, and at some points even a top 2 or 3 car in at least 2 of those races. My model has, Ross Chastain 1050 to win this race. So I don't mind if you want to roll the dice on him to win at 14-1, but I'm gonna roll with a top 3 here because he finished 3rd. He finished 2nd last year in the 2 Vegas races, which again is the closest comp for Kansas. So that's 2 podium finishes already in 5 races he's had with Trackhouse in the next gen car between Kansas and Vegas, right? 4 races last year and the first Vegas race this year. 2 podiums already out of 5. That's a 40% rate, and we're getting 4-1. That is way too far out of line on Ross Chastain for me on this bet.
Hey, we almost hit him to win last week. I was feeling good about it. I was like, oh, he's going to come in and he's going to take 2 tires. He's going to beat Truex out of the pits and we're going to be off to the races. Cause really Chastain's pit crew is just, they're on one. And this is like going back to last year. They're just so good. So when you're getting a pit crew that good and you're getting a car as fast as this car has been all year, it's hard not to have interest in Chastain to win the race. So getting him at, a top 3, we're leaning more top 3s and top 10s. If you haven't caught the drift on the podcast this week, but outrights will come. I like looking at practice and qualifying for more outright stuff, but I do think that getting a top 3 on Chastain is what are they doing? 4-1. There's a lot of good lines out there this week, and books have been really sharp here recently. but there's a lot of value this week. Like, Nick and I are smiling this week, and the last few weeks are like, where's the value? But there's a lot of value out there this week.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I rolled with Ross Chastain through turn 4. Stevie, I believe we're taking him into victory lane. So what do we have for us as we do roll into victory lane?
Well, I mean, he just got done doing donuts, so now we're gonna, take him into victory lane. We not even on purpose. We both wrote this one up in our sheet, but Ross Chastain over Chase Elliott -110. Listen, I respect Chase Elliott, and I know that I'm always down on him. I think he is very talented, and I think he's a great race car driver. It just always seems like I'm hating on him, but I mean, Elliott's he's struggled. Like, look, since he's come back from injury, he really just hasn't had the speed. Dover's one of his better tracks, and he was just nowhere to be found in the top 10 last week, running like 12th to 15th most of the race. So the team really just hasn't hit on the Hendrick Motorsports speed. Is it Chase Elliott? Is he not ready? Like, is he not 100%? I mean, the dude just broke his leg 7 weeks ago. So who knows? But I mean, I do know that Chastain has the best driver rating, average finish, best average speed on intermediate tracks with the new car. Chastain was first in speed at Auto Club, same tire that we're running this weekend. I mean, it's hard for me not to say let's take Chastain over Chase Elliott at this point of the season, like right now. So getting this at almost even money just seems like nice value.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, we both, like you said, separately wrote this up. Chastain, he led the most laps at both the Vegas races last year. Like I said, en route to those 2 podiums, while Elliott finished 9th and 21st at the 2 Vegas races. So, right there, that's 2 head-to-head wins. If we look at Kansas last year, Ross Chastain finished 7th at both races, while Elliott finished 29th and 11th. So another 2 head-to-head wins there. Obviously, Elliott didn't race at Vegas this year due to the injury, but Ross Chastain was 7th in flags. Ross is just better at this track type right now. And it's honestly, it's not close. And now we're getting Elliott coming off that injury. Like you said, he didn't look great at one of his better tracks at Dover. How physical it was. Kansas isn't going to be as physical, so that helps Elliott there. But just overall, just not as much seat time this year and not as good at this track type. So I think we just got to roll with Ross Chastain as the favorite in this one. -110, just a little too short here. It's probably more like -125, -130. I picked Ross Chastain over Chase Elliott last week on this podcast, and that one hit. So, and that was at plus money, pretty decent plus money, +125 at BetMGM. So I'm going to go back to the well here with Ross Chastain over Chase Elliott for our victory lane pick. So that is going to do it for us. Thank you for listening to the Kansas episode of Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. We'll be back this time next week to talk about bets for the Goodyear 400 at Darlington Raceway. On behalf of my co-host, Stephen Young, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you back here next week on Running Hot from Action Network.